Good evening, NJ.com viewers and readers. It's Brent Johnson here, coming to you live with U.S. Senator Cory Booker of New Jersey. We're going to ask a few questions about coronavirus, about racial injustice protests, and all kinds of things. So, Senator, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me. It's so good to be with you.
So let's start with the coronavirus relief packages that Congress has been passing. What's the latest on the next package? How quickly do you think that'll happen? And what does this mean for unemployed residents and businesses in the United States?
Well, there's a real urgency. Remember, the House of Representatives passed their next COVID package many weeks ago called the HEROES Act. And it is a real effort to do what the Fed chairman said to do, which is we need to get more money into the economy, preferably by putting it into the hands of working Americans through stimulus checks, expansion of unemployment benefits for those who have lost their jobs, helping for our public schools, and many other priorities that would really help the state of New Jersey. And so I go down there on Monday. Mitch McConnell's calling us back into session, and I know that this is going to be one of the issues. And the question is will they prioritize the things that Democrats and Republican governors are saying we need, Democrat and Republican county leaders and municipalities, all those organizations that represent state and local governments are asking for help and resources. And so these are the kind of things that I'll be prioritizing, making sure New Jersey families who might not have a job, we can expand unemployment insurance beyond the end of July. I'd like to see great, again, stimulus checks, which have helped about 87% of New Jersey families. I want to see my state government and towns and municipalities all across the state, which are in danger of cutting services and shedding employees. We should help stabilize them and sustain them through this crisis. So there's a lot of work to be done. It's going to be a tough negotiation, but I'm going to push as much as I can to help our state through this crisis, which is not over yet.
Well, Governor Murphy has mentioned that there may be a widespread layoffs among teachers, firefighters, police officers in New Jersey if we don't get this aid. And Mitch McConnell and other Republican leaders have seemed leery of passing even more aid to states. Is there a chance this doesn't happen?
Well, again, I just want to make it clear, when you say Republicans, you got to use that in a very narrow sense of the word, because nationally, Republican governors, Republican county leaders, Republican municipal leaders have said in a virtually unanimous chorus of conviction that they need the aid as well. It's not just our governor of our state who's a Democrat. And the White House has even now been signaling that they really want to see potentially stimulus checks and unemployment insurance to be expanded. So I'm actually pretty confident with that kind of force that Mitch McConnell will capitulate and do more. But that all these questions are going to be answered when we get back down there and begin the negotiations.
Unrest over racial injustice in this country, protests in the street, people pushing for reforms in the wake of George Floyd's death. You yourself have a police reform bill that would ban chokeholds and racial profiling. It's passed the House. It hasn't passed the Senate. One, are you surprised that now is the moment that we're seeing such a groundswell of support for these kind of things? And two, what do you think your chances are of passing your police reform bill through the Senate? It seems to be there. It's hit a bit of a wall there.
Well, we're definitely seeing a larger movement in our country, multiracial, multicultural movement, as people have seen already the disparities that persist in our society, from healthcare outcomes to economic disparities, and then really tragically with the deaths of Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor, George Floyd, and even a seen incident in Central Park where someone was calling a police officer on a bird watching man. And so all of these things have really helped to expand consciousness and circles of empathy and demands, frankly, for action. And that actually made the bill that I wrote along with Kamala Harris and members of the House of Representatives. We wrote a bill that would not have been possible just a few months ago. But really, it's been the activism of Americans from all backgrounds that have made this moment possible. Now, what's interesting is, again, here we have on the federal level, Mitch McConnell doing a lot to try to stymie our bill, but yet red states and blue states are passing sections of our bill in near unanimous fashion. Iowa passed elements of our bill unanimously. Colorado passed elements of our bill unanimously. And you poll Republicans and the Republican electorate, they want to stop chokeholds, which would have prevented Eric Garner's death. They want to stop no-knock warrants, that you could be sleeping in your house, plainclothes police officers can just barge in with a no-knock warrant on a nonviolent drug case. So we have a really solid bill that's being stymied now by Mitch McConnell, who seems to want to show a lot of symbols but very little substance. And your question about what will it take to get done, I've been pretty good at, especially in criminal justice issues, in finding bipartisan ways forward. I've worked really hard in the 6 years I've been in the Senate to get the kind of relationships that we can deliver real legislation, even under the Trump administration. This is going to be hard because we're staring at an election in about 110 or so days, and Mitch McConnell seems very much not willing to put a bipartisan effort together. But that's not going to stop me from pushing, and you have a chorus of people all around the country from different backgrounds who are demanding it as well, so I'm still hopeful.
Is this the kind of thing you think has to get done at a federal level and can't be done piecemeal by states?
Yeah, I think that if we want, first of all, you have to operate on the local level and the state level. There has to be reform at every level. But there's a lot of things that the federal government really has to do, from holding federal accountability when it comes to breaking laws by police officers, having the ability to not have officers be immune to using the civil courts or criminal courts to hold police officers accountable. That's something that's really important. Having the federal government be able to hold states accountable by the Department of Justice being empowered to do thorough pattern and practice investigations. That's a consequence that, again, will hold towns and cities and states accountable for what they're doing. So just like we saw in the enforcement of school desegregation, just like we saw in the enforcement of voting rights, while there's some places that might do it right, having the federal government involved in basic civil rights, basic democratic rights is really important. Without that federal backstop, you may get some cities that move forward, but others that don't. We should have national standards for policing, and we should have a federal way of enforcing those standards when things go terribly awry.
Taking this issue a step further, I know you've also sponsored a bill for reparations over slavery, and it's something that's also been introduced at the state level in New Jersey. What, is that a tougher hill to climb than police reform? Do you see that ever getting done? And what do you say to critics who say it's not our responsibility to pay for the sins of slavery because it happened in the past?
Well, first and foremost, the reparations bill that I proposed that has a lot of the leadership now that's come on board simply says, hey, we need to study this issue. It calls for a national commission to begin to dig into issues that we as Americans haven't fully confronted. Even just seeing people learn about the history of Juneteenth or the horrible massacres that went on in Black Wall Street, it just shows that we still have not fully explored often the very measurable harm to families that are still around, that were denied justice and that had severe economic impacts. We need to not be afraid of the truth. And my bill calls for us to have a real study and exploration, calling the best minds in our country together. And I think that's a really important first step to trying to correct these issues. And at the end of the day, this is not about to blame. This is about all of us as Americans realizing that we're all in this together. And this is about all of us being responsible for healing so many of the rifts that still exist in our country, where we see racial disparities in everything from the criminal justice system all the way to healthcare outcomes. This doesn't just hurt Black people over white people or Latino people or what have you. This hurts all of Americans. We are better when we actually manifest the truth and ideals of our society, which is that we are an equal nation, equality under the law, that we have liberty and justice for all. That actually helps with all of us to flourish. So getting to the truth, dealing with the gaps, that's an important exploration, and we should start by having a more public forum like other countries had in a lot of their truth and reconciliation hearings and commissions that they put into place that helped to heal and move their nations forward.
What, I know you said you want to study the issue, but what personally do you think reparations should look like? Do you have a thought on that, or how that should play out?
Well, let's not begin with the solution in mind. You know, we should actually be open to learning and going through the process together. And that's something that is, we can't, often we hear words, and I've seen this right now with activists yelling and demanding for defund the police, and immediately that stops conversation, has people falling into their camps. When with an issue like that, everybody, I talk to police officers, know that it's a much better way to affirm public safety if we had more mental health services available to people who often get swept into our criminal justice system, or drug treatment for people that end up getting swept in our criminal justice system, where police are doing things that they themselves know they shouldn't be doing. And so I'm just one of these folks that in my Senate career tried to stop people from falling into reflexive camps or reflexive divisions. What we really need is just growing circles of empathy. We need more people willing to listen, to learn, and to try to find a way as a country to affirm that we are all in this together. And God, with these divisions, we need to be a nation that's more dedicated to putting a lot more indivisible into this one nation under God.
So going briefly back to the coronavirus before the final few questions, most scientific and health experts say we expect another wave of this in the fall. What do you think the Trump administration and the U.S. government has to do differently? I know we're still in the middle of this big crisis right now with cases rising, but what has to be done here? How do we see this turn around? How do you see this happening?
Well, we are at a deficit. If you look at countries from Canada to South Korea that are way ahead of us on this, because they all have federal governments. Canada, they're right and the left of their political spectrum all joined together in a common conviction that they have to have massive amounts of testing, tracking, and tracing, that they federally mobilized resources. We are not doing that at a federal level. We have this devolution of responsibility down to the states, but the states only have so much authority, and these lines that separate New York from New Jersey or Pennsylvania from our state, those are lines that a virus doesn't really pay attention to. And so our inability to muster a World War II-like mobilization, where we get the best of American ingenuity, coordination, engagement on this issue is what's causing us to be so far behind the rest of the planet. We're only 4% or so of the globe's population, but we have a quarter of the cases, and our death rates are way out of whack with other nations that got this problem when we did. And so I've been demanding from the very beginning leadership from the White House. Instead of pushing blame, responsibility away, or pointing fingers of blame, or God forbid, making this political, we really need this a time where we're calling ourselves together to common cause, mobilizing the best of American ingenuity, resourcefulness, and national strength and muscle to fight back against what is a national pandemic and a national crisis.
There are some people who think, though, these lockdowns have gone on too far and it's cost a big toll to the economy. What do you say to people who say there needs to be a balance here of fixing the economy and saving lives?
Well, again, this is not that difficult. Look at countries that are opening their economy up now. They did it because they were able to put on masks, do the separation, stay disciplined enough, do the tracking and tracing. If somebody gets coronavirus, they know about it. They don't take 2 weeks to get their test results back. They're testing in such larger batches. All of these things have enabled them to get their economy going and start their schools up. Well, we are seeing most of our country have increasing number of cases, which makes it more hurtful to our economy. I heard a business owner who just in one of our southern states who just had their businesses shut down, California, I'm sorry. And the business owner was saying, I'm not mad at the governor for making this decision. I'm mad at us as a state and a nation for not setting up systems of tracking and tracing where we could be like a lot of our peer nations that were able to get beyond this because they did everything right. Well, we're just not doing that at a federal level. So again, I want our schools to open up. I want our economy to open up. But I know if we have another massive increase in the state of New Jersey, it's going to hurt our economy more in the long run than being responsible now. Our children need to go back to school, but that decision needs to be governed by healthcare experts and data and making this a decision based upon what's ultimately best for our children, the adults that work in our schools, and our families. And this is not complicated. It's not political. It's not left or right. It's how do we move our country forward through this crisis so that we are achieving not just success, but heck, I think that America should show that we're the best at dealing with this crisis, as opposed to under this president, what's now happened is we're one of the worst nations for having dealt with this crisis.
So I'm going to end with 4 rapid fire questions. 1, should the White House institute a national mask mandate, both indoors and outdoors in public?
Well, there's authority issues along with that, but what the White House should be doing is standing up and saying that this is what we should do. I'm going to model this behavior. Instead, we have President Trump, who is failing to even wear a mask as he should, but also sending out tweets about liberating states I have friends in Michigan from both sides of the aisle that said when President Trump sent that tweet out saying liberate states, it actually suddenly excited divides in their state that didn't exist before and created agitation. So this is the president that needs to understand that in crisis, we saw this from Lincoln to FDR, Republican and Democratic presidents, you need to lead by example and set national standards and then support states like a federal government can to achieve those standards.
Number two, who would you pick to be Joe Biden's vice presidential running mate?
I'm going to say, thank God, I'm not the one that's picking that. It's going to be a terrible situation. I got to deliver for Jersey. If I say one name of one of my colleagues, I might get a lot of my other colleagues mad at me who are up for that position. So for the sake of having relationships in Washington that can get me to deliver the bacon for the state of New Jersey, I'm going to not answer that question.
Fair enough.
Even though you just made me make a very non-vegan that bacon comment was not kosher, man.
No. Number three, Chris Christie just said he may run for president in 2024. He's not ruling it out. Would you run for president again?
I am really excited to be up for the re-election here in the state of New Jersey. I ran for president already. I'm looking forward to being a great senator for 6 years and, frankly, seeing Joe Biden win and whoever his vice president is, potentially seeing them rise to be the next president of the United States after that. So there was a window that opened up where I had a message about healing our country, about bringing people together. The way I've operated as a senator and built a reputation for someone who can work on both sides of the aisle. I think we need that spirit and that energy, and I now believe Joe Biden will be the best person to get that done.
And lastly, we talked a little bit about this last time, but have you watched anything new or learned anything new while you've been at home during this whole crisis?
I'm constantly learning. I mean, I just finished a great book, Begin Again, by a Professor Eddie Glaude, a Princeton professor. I think it's number 4 on the bestseller list. I am reading a great book now about our food systems. There's a lot of things that are hurting our state. So I'm a bit of a policy wonk, but if you want to know fun, I just saw on Netflix, I saw the movie Old Guard with Charlize Theron. I thought that was really good. I'm a sci-fi kind of a guy, and that's a really, I just enjoyed that over the weekend. Too late at night. I think I stayed up way too late, but it was just a good getaway for me.
Great. Well, thank you, Senator, for joining us, and thank you to everyone on NJ.com's Facebook page for tuning in. I'm Brent Johnson from NJ Advanced Media. Stay safe, and we'll be with you again soon.
Thanks for having me on. All the best, everybody.